Hello everybody, today my group 69 is going to do a presentation on Elders Limited. Let me first introduce my group. I'm Kingsley Kee. My group members include Tommy, Fan Qing and Si Kai. Next, let's have a look at the content of our presentation. First, we'll touch on the primary activities of Elders Limited. We'll have a look at who is the CEO of Elders Limited, who are the auditors and what are their auditing fees. We will go into details about the controlled subsidiaries and associates. We also look at the impairment of goodwill and definition of cash generating units, the tax consolidation of Elders Group, segment disclosure, and the significant accounting policies that are being adopted. Next, I'll have Si Kai to start off with primary activities of Elders Limited.
Okay, we will start with the primary activities of Elders Limited. Elders Limited is a group entity whose business major in rural services. They provide farms input such as chemical, fertilizer, and animal health. There is also farm output such as marketing and sales of livestock and wools. Elders Limited also provides in financial services such as banks, loanings, and also for real estate services for those rural areas. They focus on being network related and aims to leverage on network distributions and accumulation of capabilities. Elders Limited also engage in forestry, managing investor-funded hardwood plantation. Lastly, in automotive industry, dealings with the design and supply of automotive components. Next up, the CEO of Elders Group Limited. Mr. Malcolm Geoffrey Jackman was appointed as a CEO since October 2008. His remuneration package includes, in Aussie dollars, base salaries of $1,012,680 and other non-monetary awards such as options, performing rights, long service leave, superannuations. These contribute to 50% of his base salaries. Next up, we have the consolidated profits after tax. Elders Group Limited, in the financial year ended in 30 September 2010, Elders Limited have reported a statutory loss of about Australian dollars 217,628,000 dollars. The auditors for Elders Group Limited are Ernst & Young. They have been appointed for Elders Limited for the financial year ended in 30 September 2010 by the Board of Directors. The auditor will pay a remuneration of $1,830,000 for a statutory audit required under Corporation Act 2001. Elders Limited have engaged in Ernst & Young in other services such as tax services, others compliance services. These services were separately accounted for. Next up, we have Kingsley to explain to you the control entities.
So we have here a flow chart of Elders Group Limited. As you can see that there's 185 control entities and 8 associates. Let's go into details regarding the controlled entities. Elders Limited has a total of 185 controlled subsidiaries, of which only 172 are wholly owned. There were no subsidiaries that were less than 50% owned, and of these 185 subsidiaries, only 28 subsidiaries were incorporated outside of Australia. On a side note, New Zealand Rural Holdings Limited had 13 foreign subsidiaries, which are not recognized in the financial statements of the group. Let's move on to associates and jointly controlled entities. Elders Limited had a total of 7 associates and other investments, each holding less than 50% of available shareholdings. However, there's this exception with Futurist Automotive Interiors, which the group holds 70% of shareholdings, but the group only considers it as a jointly controlled entity as provided in the shareholders' agreement to minority parties. As of 30th September 2010, Elders Limited did not hold any interest in any jointly controlled operations nor assets. Now, we will move on to goodwill, presented by Fan Qing.
Next, I'll talk to you about the consolidated goodwill of Elders Group. The total value of the consolidated goodwill as at 30 September 2010 amounts to 103,589,000. As for the purpose of impairment testing, four categories of cash-generating units were identified. They are the Rural Service Network, Rural Service New Zealand, Forestry, and MCK Holdings. Each identifiable CGU represents the lowest level within the entity at which goodwill is monitored for the internal management purposes, each not larger than an operating segment as defined in AASB 8. Goodwill is then allocated to each CGU that is expected to benefit the synergies of the respective business combinations. In the financial year ending 30 September 2010, goodwill was impaired by 50,838,000. A substantial amount was contributed by the severe impairment of the group's forestry investments. Other impairments were contributed by Rural Services New Zealand and other CGUs. Next up, Tommy will talk about the tax consolidation group.
Okay, next we will talk about the tax consolidation group. For the purpose of taxation, Elders Limited and all its 100% wholly owned subsidiaries have entered a tax sharing agreement. The parent and its members are in a tax consolidation group, with the parents being Elders Limited. It's the head of the tax consolidation group, and under the tax sharing agreement, the assets and liabilities arise from tax funding agreement are treated as intercompany assets and liabilities with consequential adjustment to income tax expenses and benefits. We'll talk about the segment disclosure. There are 4 segment disclosure for their operating disclosure, and the group has include the segment disclosure under the accordance of AASB 8, which is the operating segment, under Note 29 of their annual report. AASB 8 provides that the aggregation into 2 or more operating segments is required when the nature of service, product processes, class of customers, method of distribution, or the nature of regulatory environment is similar. The operating segments that meets the quantitative criteria of AASB 8 is being disclosed separately. The operating segments that do not meet the criteria will only be disclosed if separate information about the segment is useful to the users of the financial statements. So the 4 segments that are identified includes the rural services, the forestry, automotive, and lastly the investments and others. Lastly, we will look at the accounting methods that are adopted by the Elders Group. Elders Limited has adopted the equity method for the recognition of investment in its subsidiaries. The equity method recognizes investment in subsidiaries at cost in the separate accounting records of the parent entity, less any impairment changes. The acquisition of subsidiaries is accounted for using the acquisition method, which results in goodwill recognition that in the event where cost of acquisition is higher than the fair value of net identifiable assets. The group has recognized goodwill in accordance with AASB 3, which is the business combination, and AASB 127, the consolidated and separate financial statements. As for investment in associates, the joint ventures, Elders Limited has recognized these investment as non-current assets in their financial statement. On the side note, Elders Limited has an associate which has been mentioned, the Futurist Automotive, with 70% shareholdings. However, due to the shareholders' agreement with the minority parties in Futurist, they have limited the controls of Elders Limited within the company. Thus, Elders Limited classifies this investment in Futurist as an associate. So I thank you for your time to listen to our presentation about Elders Limited, and I hope that you guys have a better understanding on Elders Limited.